Welcome to Civitas LA, where we feature diverse and emerging leaders who make up this dynamic region and are creating community every day and building a better tomorrow. In these bi-weekly conversations, we hear from, learn from, and are truly inspired by a new generation of civic entrepreneurs who are forging a path forward and making our region a stronger, more resilient, and connected group of citizens. Now, more than ever, we aim to elevate civic discourse, foster community connections, and promote civic knowledge and engagement across the greater Los Angeles region while elevating diverse and emerging voices in this conversation. As we mark Earth Day 2021, this year's theme being Restore Our Earth, more than 1 billion people in 192 countries around the world are participating in Earth Day activities, making it the largest civic observance in the world. Earth Day 2021 focuses on natural processes, emerging green technologies, and innovative ideas that can restore the world's ecosystems. Closer to home, Civitas LA is delighted to be joined in the studio this afternoon by Ahmad Eldridge, Senior Director of Investments at Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator, otherwise known as LACI, to learn how they're working to accelerate the commercialization of clean technologies and ensuring an inclusive green economy by unlocking innovation, transforming markets, and enhancing community. Taj, welcome to Civitas LA.
Dwayne, thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, it's great to be in studio. We're all vaccinated, so this is truly, we're making great progress. So thank you for coming in today. Taj, we always like to start with an intro to our guest. So share with our audience a brief introduction to Ahmad Eldridge and your journey to where you are now.
Absolutely, Dwayne. Thank you so much. Well, if you've met anyone from Texas, they will tell you once a Texan, always a Texan. So I was born in Dallas, and love actually brought me to California. My wife is from Baldwin Hills, and came out here as a banker with Wells Fargo, spent a decade there, then worked at UBS in Beverly Hills, and in that space was working with high-value entertainers, NBA players, what have you. And then I finished Pepperdine MBA, so go Waves, and started a PhD program at Claremont in economics. And that's when I started working with startup companies. I started investing in startup companies when I was the chief economist of a fund, and loved it. First few companies failed miserably. My wife was super aggravated. But then I got lucky in 2 exits, and that really got the bug in me. And I got into clean tech, sustainability, from a standpoint of working in the wine industry. I was investing in a wine marketing company, and I realized some of the issues with water that they were facing. And that really kind of piqued my interest and my understanding about the lack of the climate and the environment and that impacts business. And then subsequently, I was at UC Riverside as the accelerator director. And then 2018 came to LACI as the senior director for investment.
Outstanding. Well, that's great, and we look forward to this conversation. But before we begin, we always like to get an inside look at your Los Angeles, although I know you and your family live out in the San Bernardino area, or Rancho Cucamonga, I believe. But we'd like to get an inside look of your experiences, and we start with this. Favorite restaurant or two?
Two, El Floridita, which is here in the Hollywood area, as well as Versailles. Good Cuban food at both places.
Okay. Favorite watering hole?
Interesting enough, I don't drink alcohol anymore, but when I did, I would do karaoke and drinking it backstage in Culver City.
Okay, good to know. Favorite place to take a visitor to the region?
I love the Huntington. I think it has a lot of history and a lot of beauty as well.
Favorite hidden gem? Tell us something we don't know.
That's difficult because I'm still exploring myself. I've been here since '99, and I'm still exploring. But I would say that one of my favorite areas is actually outside of LA. It's in the flower fields near San Diego.
Open space always comes up in conversation. So tell us about a favorite hike or favorite park.
Oh, absolutely. The Baldwin Hills Scenic View. Love it.
Okay. Favorite street food?
Elote. Elote is Mexican street corn. It's fantastic.
Okay, excellent. Favorite neighborhood?
Favorite neighborhood? I've really grown to love Venice. I know it may sound cliche, but I'm a fan of hats. I love my milliner. My milliner is based in Venice, so it's a good neighborhood.
Well, since this is audio and not visual, we can tell our guest that Taj is sporting a very fine chapeau today. So we're going to make sure that we get some photos after the episode and put it up on social media for the guest. Taj, that was great. Let's begin our conversation. Give us an overview of the LA Clean Tech Incubator, how it came about, and its mission.
Absolutely. LACI, or the LA Clean Tech Incubator, is really unique and it's really interesting because it's a public-private partnership. The public piece of that is with the City of Los Angeles and the County of Los Angeles that supports and funds LACI. And the private piece of that are donations and support from the organizations such as Wells Fargo Bank, BMW, and others. It was founded about 11 or 12 years ago to really support the green economy, because at that time it was nascent. It was new. It was a lot of money that was lost from investors in the place initially. And so you needed organizations to really cultivate the culture in Southern California. The interesting thing about LACI is that it's exclusively for Southern California. And so the idea is to create these jobs that are coming from the green economy. And I think within the last 2 years, both with COVID and the election, it showed the importance of a green economy and the importance of job shifting that we're seeing. So LACI does really three things, Dwayne. We invest in startup companies that are in this space. We train and prepare startup companies, and then we also ensure that there's inclusion and that the communities that are getting access to these technologies look like LA.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly, yeah, I know the focus of LACI's work is really centered around energy, transportation, and the circular economy. Elaborate on these, and particularly share with me more about the circular economy.
Absolutely. I mean, we're blessed to live in a place where the sun shines greatly, and so solar energy is one of the areas that we really focus on, and not just solar energy, but solar distribution, energy storage. Transportation, one of the interesting things is that Los Angeles is going to be the place for the upcoming Olympics as well as the World Cup. And so one of the focuses that we want to do is ensure our traffic and our goods movement and our people movement are optimal for that time. So that's why there's a focus in electrification of transportation. So think of electric buses, think of electric airplanes, and think of electric vehicles and charging. The last one, which is one I'm really interested in, is circular economy. I used to be in the fashion industry, Dwayne, and one of the things I learned there is that there's a lot of waste. And, China's not going to take our waste anymore. And so we need to find a solution for that. And so circular economy looks at ways to take waste and turn it into the whole phrase, one man's trash is another man's treasure. That's the whole idea behind circular economy.
Mm-hmm. No, excellent. And I know, so over the last couple of years, we've seen any number of initiatives around sustainability, whether it's the Green New Deal at the federal level. We had an LA plan released by the mayor some years ago. Mm-hmm. That was updated last year or so in terms of a new LA Green New Deal. Give us your perspective on the state of the green economy here in our particular region and what the opportunity that exists as you see it.
Absolutely. I think you're seeing finally a collaboration between the federal level, the state level, and the local level. On the federal level, we see a lot of focus on infrastructure and that planning, and that also includes how we look at transportation, how we look at energy. On the state level, we've seen things like the governor focusing on electric vehicles by 2035, which has also increased in other states such as New Jersey and others. And so that's another area where we're seeing the aspect of policy really impact the way we're looking at. And then lastly, I'll talk about something that was recent. The mayor of LA talked about an initiative for the homeless population and homeless situation in our city. And when we look at clean tech, yes, clean tech is also about transportation. It's also about energy, but it's also about the built environment, about the way that we live. And so, we had a company within LACI that also focused on population and also with building materials. So I think those are the confluence of policy and technology are finally coming together at all three levels.
And I know, just recently the mayor's State of the City address, he announced some very bold plans for the city of Los Angeles with regards to sustainability by 2035, I believe.
Yes.
So that's exciting. So some years ago, I read that, UC Berkeley Center for Community Innovation issued a report entitled Innovating the Green Economy in California's Region. And I noted that of all the regions of California, there are 58 counties in California, that they ranked the all-around leaders for California's green economy being Los Angeles and the East Bay up in Northern California. Do you agree with that assessment? And where are we today, do you think, as a region?
I do. I definitely agree with that. I think that, one of the interesting things about the report is that it talked about green gazelles. Green gazelles are companies that grow at 20% or more year over year. And I think we're seeing a lot of that because the innovators and the entrepreneurs in the green space in Los Angeles, they're realizing that in order for them to really have a robust company, they need to take a lot of the things that they've seen in the traditional tech, and I put two air quotes around traditional tech, because I think in the past, green tech companies relied a lot on government for funding, a lot on government for contracts, and they really didn't have a conversation with the public. I think the companies now, they're thinking about ways to have this conversation with the public, because what that does is that makes the public push the money in the market towards those green economies and those green innovations.
Okay. Well, I know the city of LA has some very ambitious goals, and one was to increase private sector investment in green tech economy here by $750 million by 2025 and $2 billion by 2035. So I'm wondering if this is achievable, and what is the trajectory of investment in clean economy here in Los Angeles right now?
Absolutely, I definitely think it's achievable. You're having a number of different funding sources come into the play. So you're having banks like Wells Fargo, you're having banks like Silicon Valley Bank that are coming in and they're making lending opportunities to companies in this space. You have philanthropic or catalytic capital coming in and providing grant funding. As a perfect example, the company that I'm a part of, I'm a part of is VC Include. Okay. We just launched a project to fund 10 new climate-based venture capitalists to give them between $100,000 and $150,000, so that way they can start a fund in this space. And that was in partnership with a foundation. And so you're seeing more capital come online. You're seeing different ways of capital, from family offices to revenue share, and then you're also seeing here locally organizations such as Tech Coast Angels Los Angeles and Pasadena Angels make more and more investments in the green tech space. So I definitely think it's achievable, and my hope and my desire is that we go above and beyond that number.
Well, as we consider the statewide and regional opportunity, let's focus on the work at Lacey, and particularly the LaCretz Innovation Campus in the Arts District in downtown. I know it's been a new organization. You mentioned, 10, 11 years, but just 2019, pre-COVID, the Global World Ranking of Business Incubators and Accelerators ranked Lacey as one of the most innovative in the world. So that's quite an achievement for such a short period of time. So I'm curious to know what makes Lacey so innovative, and what do you attribute that to?
I think Lacey is what I would call a hybrid type of organization. It is built of people like me who are former founders who are in the startup ecosystem. It is built with people who understand policy and have a relationship with government. And then it's built with also people who are adept at running nonprofits, which you need to have a sustaining organization and understanding the reach within community. And so I think Lacey, unlike many other incubators and accelerators out there, Lacey kind of takes all of those in one, where we ensure we're engaged in the community, we ensure we're teaching and funding the founders, and we're ensuring that we're introducing the founders and making their relationships between the policymakers and the innovators.
Well, certainly over the last half dozen years, Lacey supported over 70 portfolio companies, raising $150 million or more and creating about 1,800 jobs. So highlight some of the work being undertaken by some of these portfolio companies, and if you can name any company or two or three or four.
No, absolutely. That is the favorite part of when I talk to people, is to talk about our founders. We have some wonderful founders. What I do at Lacey as Senior Director for Investment, my job is really threefold, is to ensure that the companies have access to capital, and ensure that the companies are really being promoted so that way other investors can find those companies. And so when we make investments in companies, we look at the traditional ways that investors look. We look at, the company's strength and everything else. But we look at three different ways that we make investments that I think are important. We make sure they have environmental impact. And so what that means is that, of course, with them being in Lacey, they're going to kind of look and do they have greenhouse gas emissions reduction, or they're saving water, or they're saving energy. So that's one thing. We look at economic impact. And Dwayne, I'll give you an example. When I first started looking at the clean tech in California, I noticed that all of the scooters, which is essentially clean tech, smart mobility, were all on one side of the community, on the west side. And what Lacey has done with this fund, we say that if you're deploying your technology, we want to see you deploy those technology in all parts of Los Angeles. Okay. Opportunity zones, LMIs, which stand for low to moderate income communities. And so that's, I think, a fantastic thing that we're doing in the way that we really monetize that initiative. We put value to it. So in order for us to invest, these companies have to either deploy their technology in those communities or hire from those communities as well. And then lastly, it's about a social framework where we tell the founders that we want to see diversity, underrepresented diversity in your C-suite, your senior leadership, or your board. Mm-hmm. And so what that does is that really truly brings this idea of building an inclusive green environment and ensuring that the companies look like Los Angeles. Some companies I'm really proud of are companies like Envoy, which is a company that does car sharing for apartment dwellers. And one of the things that I love that they did is typically their clientele are like the Irvine Company, high-end apartments on the west side. Mm-hmm. But through us and through the various partnerships, they deployed their technology in Pacoima. So citizens of that community can utilize electric vehicles for free and have access to them to utilize them the same way as people in the wealthier parts of Los Angeles have access to as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was going to ask you, about that. I saw that, diversity is a guiding principle for Lacey. So we're going to ask about how that is promoted through the work of Lacey and its programs. Can you speak to that in terms of also, facilitating workforce development opportunities? You may or may not know, but I think you do know that, we've had a number of episodes previously where we've spoken with guests who are, in terms of building community, they've talked about, programs aimed at young boys and girls of color and getting them motivated about STEM. But you're working with founders, who already have the idea. They're working with you all to raise capital. How are you all working with them to promote diversity in workforce?
Absolutely. I think it's important to think about the phrase, you can't be what you can't see. And when I was growing up, for me, growing up in Dallas, Texas, the areas that I looked at were either sports or entertainment was the two pathways to wealth. And it wasn't until I read a book by a guy by the name of Reginald F. Lewis that I realized there's something called venture capital. Mm-hmm. And so to that point, what we do at Lacey is that we have a group that invites school-aged children to come in and see the founders in their element and maybe really inspire them to be the next generation of Angelenos who get into the green tech space, because we feel like this is a long-term play. Mm-hmm. I mentioned Envoy, and there's some other founders other companies such as Circuit that's doing a lot of work in Leimert Park. Amp Air, that is an airplane company that's really teaching the next generation of founders of color to want to fly, to want to get behind the cockpit. And I think I would hope that a lot of these founders, when they come to Lacey, we have both the financial support as well as the community support to help them take these initiatives on. A lot of times founders would want to do these things, but it's a cost to that, and we understand that. Yeah. And so that's why we have partnerships, and we work with them to bring in other catalytic capital sources, like I talked about, the foundations and others, to ensure that they have the wherewithal to make those changes and also to be what people can see. I think there are a lot of opportunities that I see children walking around Lacey and getting excited, and that for me makes me happy even more so than writing a check to founders.
Well, I know, we had an episode with Effie Turnbull Sanders, formerly the executive director at Slate Z, and they talked about their work in terms of stimulating access to opportunities in STEM careers in South Los Angeles. And you touched on something earlier about how Lacey tries to engage in opportunity zones, which are federally designated zones to try to stimulate, investment in previously underserved areas. So is there an overlap there? How does Lacey and its founders engage its work and its growth opportunity, in some of these underserved census tracts in the greater Los Angeles region?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, Lacey itself is an opportunity zone that's changing. We're right down the street from Skid Row.
Okay.
I think you mentioned we're in the arts district, so we definitely want to make sure we have a history and a relationship with the art community, the artistic community. But yeah, like I mentioned with our fund, when we look at that, we encourage our companies to deploy their technology in opportunity zones. We encourage our companies financially to hire from people who were born and raised from those opportunity zones. The reason we do that is because we feel like venture capital and startup is about relationships. Mm-hmm. But if everybody comes from the same area, you're going to have the same results. When you have people coming from different areas, they come into play. And Dwayne, I'll give you a perfect example. If anyone who are listening ever rode on a scooter or in the West Side, I want to ask yourself, why wouldn't that scooter have a basket on the back of it so people can utilize the scooter for much more utility? Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people will look at that micromobility vehicle as just a bit of fun, but there are people in Los Angeles that can use that micromobility for utilization to get to and from the stores or areas where there's a food desert. Mm-hmm. And so I think little things like that wouldn't come into people's mind unless they have people from certain communities where there are food deserts, and so I can make those recommendations. So I think that's one of the benefits for us to really encourage our founders to look beyond their sphere of influence when they're hiring and when they're getting people who are making decisions of hiring and firing in their own companies.
And do you do that through an advisory board? How do you assemble, this range of men and women to offer that sort of advice that the founder may or may not have? Because I did see that, a number of the organizations within Lacey are deploying technology that have a positive impact in underserved communities. So how are you addressing the equity issue?
In two ways. Number one, we have a series of coaches that are independent contractors that we hire, that we have the companies work with. And those coaches always put, equity and inclusion at the top of the mind for our founders, but they also make it to where they understand they can still carry a business and move forward. We also have a group called Enhancing Communities that's led by the wonderful Estelle Reyes. And Enhancing Communities really ensures that our founders have access to those community organizations. Okay. Give you a perfect example. If I was a white founder and Lacey came to me and said, hey, we want you to be more diverse, the first question I would have is, well, where do I find these diverse people at? Right. And we don't expect our founders to do that. We want to give our founders as much help as possible. We always say that we are the fifth Beatle for our founders. And so with Enhancing Communities, we partner with various community organizations, be it fraternities, be it the NSBE, which is the National Society of Black Engineers, okay, be it many different organizations in the Latino community and the LGBTQ community and what have you, to ensure that our founders have access to these smart and talented people. Mm-hmm. Because there's a phrase that says that talent is universal, but opportunity is not. Okay. So we want to make sure we're providing everybody with opportunity.
Well, I know something unique about Lacey, which I find really fascinating, given that you are in the arts district, is that you're one of the few incubators that I'm aware of that has an artist in residence on the team. So tell us about that. What is the purpose behind that, and how does that work?
We are the only incubator.
Oh, the only, okay.
Artist in residence. I love it. What I failed to mention is that even though my graduate degrees are in economics, my undergrad degree is in poetry and literature. Okay. So shout out to all the liberal arts students. But we did that because we wanted to give a nod to where we were located at, okay, the arts district. I think when we talk about communities in California or anywhere else in the United States, and we talk about subjects such as gentrification, one way to avoid that is to really be true to the history of that community. And so the history of that community was on arts. And what we do is that we believe, or I believe, that creativity spurs innovation, and innovation spurs creativity. So you want to be surrounded by art that really, really speaks to you. And what the artist director does at Lacey, they have a program where they invite other artists in to work side by side with our founders. And they create art that's inspired by our founders' work. And if anybody collects art, that there's a certain type of person that collects art, typically a rich person, and our founders want to get in touch with who? Rich people. So it just makes sense to have that both, but also it gives you a good feeling too to see that piece of work around you as you're working.
Oh, that's amazing. That is truly amazing. Well, Taj, one of the things we always like to talk about, and you've hit on some of this already, is about collaboration and partnerships. And certainly, Lacey is a collaboration between the city and the county and others. And you have prior history with the Center for Innovation, Technology, and Entrepreneurship, or Excite, which is out at UC Riverside.
Yes.
Which is a collaboration. So speak to the important role of public-private partnerships and collaboration in advancing this type of work.
Absolutely. When I was working on my dissertation, that was one of the things that I spoke about, is that I felt like for economic development, the government can't do it alone, and the private markets can't do it alone. There truly has to be public-private partnerships, and I think that both Excite and Lacey exhibit that. And so I think what it does is that it allows the patient capital or the patient working of government, along with the spur and the movement of private capital to move forward, especially when we're talking about clean tech. Both Excite and Lacey were both in the clean tech space. And so I think that you're going to see a lot more of that. From the federal side, Amy Klobuchar and others have been putting bills together to really move forward on that. I think, Dwayne, what people failed to realize is that during COVID, we lost over 800,000 small businesses. Wow. And even though that's a sad statistic, what I also see is that that's over 800,000 plus entrepreneurs who are ready to get back on the saddle and who are ready to have the experience of running a business. And so I think we can only make those numbers happen with public-private partnerships.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly, as the work of Lacey advances, how does one get involved? What are the types of partnerships and collaboration that you're looking for? You've mentioned philanthropy, you've mentioned government. How does a listener, learn more about Lacey and get involved in the organization and or with the underlying founders?
Absolutely. Well, number one, when this COVID is all behind us, please do visit Lacey. It's a beautiful facility, 60,000 square foot right next to Skid Row. And it's a really great place to visit. Where the building is actually owned by the Department of Water and Power. So if you are a citizen of the city of LA, it is your building as well.
We will let DWP know that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also, too, I think while we're still in a virtual world, there are several events that are happening. I think the one benefit of COVID, if there is any, is that it has made information be more attainable. Mm-hmm. And so now you have access to events and panels that typically you would have to get into a car and drive from one part of the city to another part of the city. So I would definitely suggest coming on to Lacey's website, laincubator.org, and take a look at any events. I want to add this, and I failed to mention when we talked about workforce. One of the things that I love is that we not only work with the white collar entrepreneurs or public that's here in Los Angeles with the entrepreneurs, but we'll also do what I kind of call the green collar. And we have a fellowship training program where we're training the next generation of charging station repairmen, electric vehicle repairmen and repairwomen to come aboard, because the days of the mechanic working on the Toyota are gone. And now you're going to have a semi-computer engineer working on the cars that are essentially computers with wheels. And so I love that Lacey is preparing that population as well, because I think you have to think about the whole community, not just one sector of the community. Mm-hmm.
And tell me this, how many founders do you take into the Lacey family? What does that selection process look like?
Well, in 2018, when I first came to Lacey, we were an incubator. And the difference between an incubator and an accelerator is an incubator, you come in and think of it as like a warm home. You stay as long as you need in order for you to leave the nest. We since switched to an acceleration model, which means that we have a set time frame that we work with the companies and we put them through a circuit. And so we started that right at the top of COVID. So in 2020, we had our first cohort of about 15 companies that came through. We just finished our cohort 2 recruiting, so we have another 15 companies that have just been onboarded to Lacey. And if you are a clean tech founder, we have a third cohort that we're recruiting for right now. They'll start in the late summer for Lacey.
And roughly how many companies would you take into any particular group?
Same thing, around 15 or 16 companies. Okay. We tend to that's a good number for our team to work with, both for our coaches and our team on the investment side.
Mm-hmm. Well, Taj, I know in a conversation you had previously, you've mentioned in the past that clean tech will be normalized and that we're going to have a situation where it's not going to be in a separate space. Can you elaborate on that? And, what do you see for the future of clean tech and sustainability in our particular region? Absolutely.
I'm a personal investor in a company called Bevy, Bevy, which is similar to Zoom. It is an online platform for conferences, and they do both online and in person. When I invested in it, I didn't think about anything else but clean tech, because my thought was with Zoom, what Zoom has taught us is that we can essentially put on conferences, we can put on panels, we can do everything at our home and reduce greenhouse gas emissions by traveling and by airplanes and things of that nature. So I say that to say I think between what happened in Texas, my beloved home state, with the grid. I think clean tech is on the forefront of people's minds now, and it's no longer going to be this offset of this idea, and it's similar to impact. I think, when in the past people used to look at impact investing as a separate philanthropic endeavor, and now we're realizing that every investment that we make has an impact. Right. We just need to decide if it's positive or negative.
No, that's wonderful. Taj, this has been a really terrific conversation. Really so glad you came in this afternoon. But as we say on Civitas LA, we like to give our guests the last word. So what are your closing thoughts?
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, number one, it was a pleasure being here. I appreciate it. It's such a beautiful day in Los Angeles. I would love for people to get out and just look. But I would say you this, when COVID first hit Los Angeles, I remember March the 13th, it was a Friday. And the next day I was in Baldwin Hills, and we went outside the door, and we can literally see the Hollywood sign because there were no cars on the street because everybody was stuck. I want people to remember that, because I want you to understand that if we switch to electric vehicles, we can have that again. If we look at the way we focus on our energy, and we not only invest but keep our minds to green economy, we can have that again. And I think and I hope that we can have an opportunity when this is all over to really have a sit down in a nice area with clean air in California, have some great food outside. So it's been a pleasure, and I hope everybody has a wonderful time here in Los Angeles.
No, Taj, thank you so much. We really look forward to keeping track of the great work that Lacey is doing, and we really look forward to following the successes of those founders on to achieve great things. So this has been a great dialogue, and we appreciate your work, and we appreciate the work that Lacey does here for our regional economy. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we hope you join us in 2 weeks for another great civic conversation. Until we meet again, stay strong and get involved. To learn more about Civitas LA and share feedback on this program, or if you have a recommendation about future programs, please visit our website at www.civitasla.com. And if you're on our site, we invite you to take our listener survey and offer your suggestions. We also invite you to visit our support page and consider ways that you might support this work, including through the purchase of some great new merchandise that we have, including a great Civitas LA tote bag and an outstanding Civitas LA face mask, which everyone is wearing right now. And finally, as we grow our Civitas LA family, we invite you to connect with us on Facebook at Civitas LA, Instagram at Civitas_LA, and on Twitter at Civitas_LA.